Magnus Carlsen and Anish Giri are best enemies. You can always guarantee that there's going to be an interesting struggle when they played. And this game today in the Goldmoney Asian Rapid Tournament, the latest online tournament in the Champions Chess Tour, well, this was something else. So Carlsen with the white pieces, and it's a gioco piano, and move order here is varied and complex. But let me point out, here is a big moment where white can just play h3, which would stop what's coming next. Let's put it like that. h3 is a normal move. Carlsen played knight d2 instead, which appears absolutely normal. Of course, this knight wants to spin round here, but it allows this shot. Knight g4, attacking the pawn on f2. The rook steps up. Now, if white has time just to push the knight away, then everything is fine, everything is normal. But here is the trick. Black plays king h8, and if h3, you have time to play f5, so that if pawn takes, you take here, and of course this is starting to look very tasty after the knight moves, followed by the queen coming in. So after king h8, Carlsen played pawn to b4. Now, not only does that potentially set up some kind of queenside attack, but actually we'll see the real reason for this in a second. f5. So Giri begins his attack on the king side. This is not to be underestimated. Obviously, black starts to open the f-file. Bishop b3 looks a little bit tentative. The idea is that if pawn takes pawn, then you recapture with the knight. And there's no d5. Anyway, Giri played bishop d7 and rook a2. So now we can see another reason for playing the pawn to b4. The rook steps up, and, well, later on it can add support to the pawn on f2. Of course, it would take too long to get the rook into the game because there's a bit of a traffic jam here. Queen e8, shifting towards the king side. Pawn takes pawn, bishop takes pawn. And the knight comes round to f1. Well, so far it looks pretty nice for black. Got this nice pawn chain. But white can strike back. Let's have a look. Bishop e6 and now b5. Bishop takes, queen takes. The knight has to come back. And now d4. So that shuts out this bishop for the moment. And you can see actually Carlsen has managed to coordinate pretty well. Those rooks protect each other. The pawn on f2 is securely protected. There is pressure on the e file, that's nice. On the pawn on e5. So things seem to be swinging in white's direction. Knight g6. And this move from Carlsen again looks pretty nice because now there's a connection to the king side. So the queen protects the knight on f3. There's going to be no surprise with an exchange sacrifice there to damage the pawns. Now queen f7, queen d7 look pretty natural to step away from the e file. But instead e4. And that is quite a risky move. One thing is the pawn is pinned. And that's what Carlsen was relying on when he played knight g3. Now, knight g5 was also possible. And this starts to look quite nice for white. Obviously, the e-pawn is attacked. But also, it opens up the third rank. And the queen has the potential to swing across here as well. I think that's a difficult position for black. But instead, Carlsen just went to attack the e-pawn. But he was surprised by Giri's next move. Pawn takes knight, sacrificing the queen. This is incredibly dangerous. incredibly dangerous for white. You can see all black's pieces are in play. That pawn is really nasty. And the bishop, which was cut out of play, now threatens to join the attack. And just to add to all white's problems, there is potential for something to happen on the back rank. It's fantastically complicated, and of course, by this stage, they didn't have much time on the clock, so it was starting to get crazy. Carlsen brought the queen back. In fact, it is possible to play pawn takes pawn, but white can only draw this if he finds some unbelievable moves. I mean, there are some very nice tricks here. For example, pawn takes knight, you can give a check. The king steps up and rook c3 takes, and knight d5 discovered, check. That's relatively simple to what comes next. In fact, after this move, so here's the important position. In fact, knight e2, my computer tells me, is a strong move. The point is to cover the f4 square so it prevents knight f4 check. And that knight holds the position, basically. Good enough for a draw. But as I said, Carlsen played the queen back to d1. Now I think this is also okay, but it looks really scary. Knight h4, and this is very difficult to play for white especially. Pawn takes pawn, good move. And here Carlsen, I think understandably, he's just playing on instinct. He brought the rook across to challenge the rook here. Rook e2 should lose. In fact, after pawn takes knight, white is okay here. After this, black takes the queen back. And it looks quite nice for black, but actually after rook e2, the rook is going to come down here, and that's good enough counterplay. Let's come back. So pawn takes pawn just happened. Carlsen played rook e2. And here is where Anish missed a tremendous blow. Let me show you the main variation. Knight takes pawn. If rook takes rook, rook takes, king takes, and now a wonderful little tactic. Bishop takes pawn, check. There's no alternative but to take this. You promote. Okay, I'm having a bit of a joke. You can make a queen, of course, but bishop will do. And after king takes bishop, knight f3, forking king and queen, and knight takes queen. Not easy to see when you have very little time on the clock. So knight f2, that was the most beautiful variation, but it is winning in other variations too. Instead, rook takes rook. Also better for black. And knight f2. And here, well, king h2 is the best move. Bishop e3 was played. This should lose, but it's very difficult to see why. Basically, black can win with knight d3. Now that is a real computer move, of course, because Giri in the game played knight h3, which just looks the most natural move on the board. Knight d3 seems to move away from the king, but the point is this: if queen takes, knight check, king takes, and we've got another lovely knight fork. And otherwise, let's say knight here, here, and black just ends up a piece up. And the threat of knight d3 is, well, let me make a random move, a5, then knight e1. Again, we're using these forks, so threat to check here, and if queen takes, we've got a nice knight fork again. So a wonderful move, knight d3, but so counterintuitive to move the knight away. Said Giri played knight takes h3, which looks very normal and looks very strong. King h2, g1, bishop takes, and here Giri grabbed material. It looks very tempting. Knight takes g1 is a better move. And if king takes, well, white is just about surviving, but this looks nice for black. Cementing this bishop on this wonderful square. And with rook and bishop and 3 pawns, well, I would say pretty good winning chances. It's not over yet, but looks promising. Okay, let's come back here. So instead of knight g1, knight f3 check played. King h1 and knight takes bishop. So Giri has won material. So it's rook, knight, and bishop against the queen. But here Carlsen went into overdrive. He flashed out queen e7. This is like his first real attacking move of the game. And he seized his chance. Rook g8. And now he bashed out knight f5. Excellent move. And after here, he bashed out knight h6. He saw this in an instant. Now, if the rook moves away, this is really risky. White. Well, white could easily win that one because suddenly the rook is cut out and mate is threatened. So after knight h6, well, Giri very prudently took the knight and the lone queen forced a draw by perpetual check. There we go. So the game ended in a draw. Wow. Lucky escape for Carlsen. Well, I don't know about lucky, but he seized his chance at the end. But in this kind of position, when you're low on time, Giri, well, it's kind of understandable why he didn't find these kills. But I still think he'll be kicking himself because he built up a winning position. I think he caught Carlsen out with this whole variation, although it's pretty well known. But maybe Carlsen was just playing the opening quickly, didn't think too much, and just fell into this. But as I said, it's a well-known idea for black. And Giri seized the initiative, and when he had his chance, yeah, excellent queen sacrifice. But I think he'll be disappointed he didn't put this one away, and there are some beautiful variations there. So do join me on Chess24 for live commentary. I'm commentating with Tanya Sachdev. Check out the stream. There's just fantastic games. It's incredibly exciting. And yeah, let's see who qualifies for the knockout stage. Thanks for watching.